This is chapter 5. Chapter 5. All right. So when we're talking about tissues here, all right, the definition of a tissue is a group of similar cells that perform a common function. Okay? Anatomically, when we're talking about tissues, though, all right, again, it's going to be a group of similar cells, but also we're going to have this part, which is called extracellular material. Dissect the word. Extra in this case means outside the cell. All right. So now what we're dealing with cells. All right, the actual smallest biological functional unit of the body. And then we've got some stuff around it, some material around it. And all of that together is a tissue. Okay? And I'll get into more detail here in a moment. Okay? So tissues have different functions. Some might be secretion. All right? Some might be filtration, absorption, or protection, for example, like our skin. Believe it or not, our skin offers protection. Okay? So, great test question. The study of tissues is going to be called histology. Okay. Now, previous students of mine they probably get sick and tired of me repeating this, but I don't care because I guarantee you they all know this, and you need to know this too. You should be able to rattle off the 4 tissue types that are present in your body. Okay. So we will hammer it home with you, but these are the 4 tissue types: epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. The last 2 I think are easy. We're all pretty familiar with muscle tissue and nervous tissue because you've heard of muscle, well, obviously, and then nerves. But the first 2, epithelial and connective, people aren't as familiar with that. Okay? But those are the 4 tissue types in your body. Okay? The big, and then there's subdivisions, and we're going to go through that. Okay? So these tissues are varied in both the way that they appear, their anatomy, right, and also their physiology, their function, like what they do. Okay, so we're going to start off with the first tissue type right now, the epithelial tissue. And I promise you, I'll get into more detail about some of this stuff in lecture. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how we name epithelial tissue. Okay, because there's a system that we use, nomenclature. We have a system for it. So I'm going to teach you how to do it. See, when you look at this simple epithelium, stratified epithelium, pseudostratified epithelium, I'm going to teach you how to name, all right, non-ciliated columnar epithelium. Like, what is that? And just by the name, you'll be able to figure out what that tissue is going to look like. Okay? I know it sounds complicated now. Trust me, it's very complicated. But we'll make it easy for you. Okay? So let's start off with this. Simple. When I say simple, whatever follows, doesn't matter at this point. If I say simple squamous epithelium, simple columnar, doesn't matter. Simple means one layer, one cell layer. Okay? So when we talk about the first way that we're going to classify epithelial tissue is by the number of cell layers. I'm going to teach you that right now. Okay? So the first way we do that is if we say something is simple whatever, that means it's one cell layer thick. That's it. Okay? So our epithelium sits on a structure called the basement membrane. Okay? All epithelium, again, we'll talk more about this in lecture, all epithelium sits on the basement membrane. Okay? With simple epithelium, every single cell in that only that one layer, all right, makes contact with the basement membrane. All right, good so far? Just think of it like this. Some of the houses here in Greenville are built on slabs. Does anyone here live in a house that is built on a slab? I've got a crawl space, okay? All right, so think of that slab, all right, as the basement membrane, okay? The epithelium will then be on top of that basement membrane, okay? So here's the slab, and then on top of it, we have cells that are all stuck together, okay? And that's going to be our simple epithelium. I'm not going to continue that, okay? So just keep that in mind. So simple epithelium, when we talk about their functions, what are we going to use this simple epithelium to do? We're going to use it to filter things out. We're also going to use it to absorb things. Do you think it's easier to filter? All right, perfect example. If I wanted to take water and drain it through a cloth, okay, and I just wanted water to just pass through the cloth, is it easier for me to use one single handkerchief, let's say, all right, is it easier for the water to pass through one single handkerchief or 1,000 handkerchiefs stacked together? One, yeah, perfect. So doesn't it make sense that simple epithelium is great for filtering stuff and it's great for absorbing things? All right, it's much easier for something to be absorbed across a single layer of something than 1,000 layers of something, right? Makes sense, okay? And also, we'll see it for secretion. So think about that. Simple epithelium, these are the three main functions: filtration, absorption, secretion. Okay, good so far? You can take it slow. All right, so the next nomenclature, the next way that we classify epithelium is what we call stratified epithelium. Okay, so stratified epithelium is 2 or more layers. It could be 10 layers, 100 layers, whatever. Okay, if it's 1 layer thick, it's simple. If it's 2 or more, it's stratified. Done. Okay. So this next statement here says only the basal layer is in contact with the basement membrane. So at this time, you probably don't know what basal means. Basal begins with a B, bottom begins with a B. Okay? So that means if we have stratified epithelium that's 10 layers thick, okay, the bottom layer, I'll show you right here on this picture. The bottom layer is in contact with the basement membrane. See, look here. Here's simple epithelium. All right, here's the basement membrane. Every single cell is in contact with that. This is stratified epithelium. See all the layers here? Here's our basement membrane. Guess what? The basal layer, that means bottom, all right, that's this layer here. That's the only layer that's in contact with the basement membrane. Y'all see that? Cool? Okay. One of the things I should show you, and I'll go over it in lecture, but I should probably do it here just briefly. It'll take me a second. Is when we have a cell, I'm going to draw it like this, like a rectangle. Okay, here's the nucleus. We'll talk about that. Okay. All right. So this is the bottom of the cell. Okay, and this up here is the top. So the bottom of the cell, we call that the basilar or basal surface. Easy to remember. And the top of the cell, we call that the apical. Anyone ever heard of apex? Apex is the top of a mountain, okay, the pinnacle. All right, so the top of the cell is called the apical surface. And then on the sides, that's the lateral surface, okay? Apical is the top, basal is the bottom, okay? So if you hear me talking about that, and these terms, all right, give a cell what we call polarity. Now, I know we just talked about electrical charges and stuff. That's not what we're referring to here. It just means, all right, that different parts of the cell have, planet Earth has a North Pole and a South Pole, and we always think because of the globe that the top part of the globe is the North Pole and the bottom part of the globe is the South Pole. Same thing here, all right? So when we talk about a cell having polarity in this sense, it just means that the top part of the cell is the apical, the bottom part of the cell is the basal. That's all. Okay, because I've seen it on tests before, because I've put them on tests, talking about how a cell has polarity, and that's what I'm referring to. You have a top to the cell, you have a bottom to the cell, you have sides to the cell. That's all it is. Okay, so stratified epithelium, all right, because it has many layers like this right here, this picture here. This is great. All right, let me ask you this. Would you be inclined to walk around barefoot, all right, outside or anywhere, even in your house, if the bottoms of your feet were just one cell layer thick compared to many cell layers thick like this?
No.
Heck no. Heck no. You would not be walking around because you would be tearing your skin apart, bleeding all over the place, you'd be in excruciating pain, right? So we're going to find stratified epithelium, right? We're going to find stratified epithelium in places that undergo mechanical or physical stress. Okay, our skin, perfect example. All right, the outer surface of our skin, the epidermis, is made up of stratified epithelium. Okay? And its job is to undergo mechanical stress. The lining of your mouth, your cheeks, all right, that's made up of stratified squamous epithelium. All right? Your throat, same thing. All right? Your anus, same thing. All right? If you thought that hemorrhoids were bad, all right, they'd be really bad if you only had one cell layer thick. Okay? So keep that in mind. Okay? So high mechanical stress areas. All right. And then finally, the last type of epithelium, when we're talking about cell layer numbers, is pseudostratified. Pseudo means fake, false. Okay? So this type of epithelium, it looks like it's layered, but it's lying to you. It's deceiving you. It's only one cell layer. Okay? One cell layer, but it looks like it has many layers. Okay? So one of the things that you need to understand, and that's this last part right here. Okay? For pseudostratified epithelium, again, great true-false question or multiple choice, more so true-false. All cells contact the basement membrane. They all do, okay? But not all of them reach the apical surface. And now we know what the apical surface is. That's the top, okay? So they all connect to the basement membrane. They all connect to the slab of our house, but they don't always make it up to the 10th floor, okay? They do not reach the apical surface. I'm going to skip this slide and come right back. All right. I want that one. All right. So that's what this diagram is also showing you. Apical surface up here, basilar surface down here. Okay. This is figure 5.2 in your book. Take a look at it. I love this figure because it basically explains classification of epithelium. All right. So we just did one half of the nomenclature. We talked about the layers. Now we're going to talk about cell shapes. Okay, that's the second part of how to name this epithelium. Okay, so there's three types, well actually four types of cell shapes that we're going to discuss. Okay, so the second part of classification is by the shape of the cell. You guys at home, are you doing okay? I hope so. Yes, okay, good. Cool. All right. So there's four types. Okay. The first one is squamous. I want you to think, your book describes it as a flattened tile shape. I always thought that squamous looks like a fried egg. Okay. It's kind of a flattened kind of shape like that. All right. So the cell itself has a fried egg appearance to it, or tile shape appearance. The nucleus is kind of flattened, okay? So it looks kind of like what I've drawn here. Cuboidal, look at the word, cuboidal, right, is going to be in the shape of a cube. The cell is as tall as it is wide, and the nucleus, the control center of the cell, is directly in the center, and it's spherical, okay? In general, it's not always, but in general, the shape of the nucleus is going to be similar to the shape of the cell. Okay, not exactly. I mean, I don't want you to think that in a cuboidal cell that the nucleus is going to be a cuboidal shape also. Nucleus is always going to be some sort of spherical or rounded type, okay? But since the squamous cell is kind of flattened, so is the nucleus, okay? All right, the next type of cell shape, all right, is the columnar. And that's like the word, column. Tall, taller than it is wide, okay? And the nucleus sits at the bottom, or the basal part of the cell. And it looks like an egg, oval, okay? But it's usually located in the bottom portion of the cell, okay? And then our final cell type is the transformer cell, okay, the transitional cell. All right, now it changes shape depending on what's happening with that cell type or tissue type, okay? So usually it's because the epithelium is being stretched, okay? So I'll go over that with you, All right, but usually its shape varies. Okay, so I think it's aptly named transitional because I think of it as a transformer. Okay, so that's the second part of the nomenclature of how we classify the cell, all right, the epithelial, how we name epithelial tissue. Okay, we first do it by how many layers, and then we do it by the shape of the cell. Okay, so now we're going to learn some of the different types of epithelium. Okay, so here is a table, all right, or a flow chart that you should definitely start to work on this weekend. Okay, this kind of breaks things down for you. All right, it's figure 5.3. All right, so it shows you, all right, we start off by how many layers, simple epithelium versus stratified, and then we get into this, all this stuff is the real detailed specific. We're going to go through all that. Not tonight, but we're going to get some in there, okay? But I would start to look at this first, make flashcards if you want, to try to start to figure out, all right, and learn some of that material. So we're going to start off with the simple squamous epithelium. Okay, so look. Simple, how many cell layers is it? One. Booyah. Squamous, what's the shape of the cell? Fried egg, flattened. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay. So this simple squamous epithelium, okay, is great because remember, what did we say about simple epithelium? Its functions. What are some of the functions for epithelium? Simple epithelium. Filter, absorption, and secretion. Okay? So in all actuality, this is the thinnest barrier, right, that you can find in the body. It's one cell layer thick. That's very, very small, okay, or very, very thin. So the nice thing about it is, all right, for secretion, absorption, or filtration, things can move across that barrier, all right, because it's so thin, all right, with relative ease, but also really fast. Don't you think that's kind of important in our lungs? When you're breathing and you got to get oxygen into your blood and you got to get rid of carbon dioxide, which is a cell waste product, all right, and you want to breathe that out, that's kind of an important thing. So it would be a real pain in the butt, all right, if the lining to those air sacs, instead of it being one cell layer thick, if it was 20 cell layers thick, right? Would you agree? That would be bad because oxygen, if it only has to cross one cell, that's not bad. But could you imagine a molecule of oxygen having to fight its way through 30 cell layers, 40 cell layers? It takes time, all right? We see that when people get scar tissue in their lungs, all right? If you get a bit, like, perfect example, COVID. We're seeing that quite often. They get inflammation in the lungs. The lungs try to repair the damage from the inflammation. Guess what happens? It starts to deposit scar tissue in there. Now, we went from a one cell layer thin barrier, all right, to something that's many cell layers thick. So do you think that oxygen and carbon dioxide are going to be exchanged as easily? And what happens when that occurs? You have more difficulty breathing. It's a problem, okay? All right. So when we talk about the simple squamous epithelium here, all right, we see it lining the air sacs or the alveoli of your lungs, but also we'll see it in the blood vessel walls and the lymphatic vessel walls. When we see it in the vessel walls, we refer to it as endo, that's on the inside, endothelium. You need to know that. Okay? And then when we're talking about the serous membranes, we just talked about all those serous membranes, visceral pericardium, parietal pericardium, all that stuff, right? When we're dealing with the serous membranes, we refer to it as mesothelium. Anyone ever heard of mesothelioma? Darn right. Yep, that's the first thing I think of too when I hear the term mesothelium. Okay? Mesothelioma obviously is a pathology having to do with the serous membranes, most commonly in the lungs. Okay? And there's actually plenty of lawyers that are making a lot of money off of that right now. You ever seen the commercials? you or a loved one had mesothelioma, call Jacob and Jacob or whatever. Okay, so that's simple squamous. Good so far. These slides right here at the bottom are in your textbook, by the way. We'll see them again when we do lecture. All right. All right, how about simple cuboidal epithelium? That's the next one. Okay, simple is telling us it's one cell layer thick, but now we're dealing with a square cell, a cube-shaped cell. All right. So we're going to see this type of epithelium in places where we're going to need to absorb things and secrete things. So where do we absorb stuff? Well, the skin is a great place. Okay, we're going to see this type of epithelium predominantly more so next semester when you study the kidneys, but in the duct system of your kidneys. Okay, secretion, think of glands. Glands like to secrete stuff. Okay, so big portion of the glands here. And we'll learn about the anatomy of glands later on. Okay, so that's simple cuboidal. And don't worry, we're going to see some of these slides again in lecture. Okay, so if I kind of move through it a little bit fast there, it's all good. All right, so keep in mind the shape of these cells, and these are just great pictures right here. All right, you can see here's the cell itself. It's as tall as it is wide. Nice spherical nucleus at the center here. All right, and this is actually found, all right, in the, what's the picture of that? Give me 1 second. I can't even see my glasses. Huh. No, I'm trying to look at that and see what that's representing. At one point, I want to say I knew, but I can't tell exactly what that's supposed to represent. It's so small. No. I cannot tell if that's oh, I should know that. All right, that's a kidney tubule. All right, at first, for a second there, I couldn't tell. That's the duct system. The resolution's not very good. But again, you'll learn about this for the formation of urine. Okay, so this is an actual kidney lumen here, and depends on where we're at in the duct system of the kidneys there. All right, let's do one more slide, and then we'll call it a night. Let's hit up simple columnar epithelium. Okay, it might be 2 more slides because there's 2 types. So, okay, simple columnar epithelium, again, we already know it's simple, it's one layer. Columnar, the cell's going to be taller than it is wide. All right, we know where the nucleus is located. All right, but functionality, all right, this type of epithelium is great for secretion, but also absorption. So we're going to see this type of epithelium in your digestive system, big time. Okay, so there's 2 types. All right, first type is what we refer to as non-ciliated. The second is called ciliated. Does anyone know what cilia is? Yeah, it's a hair-like structure. Okay, so your cells can have 3 modifications to the outside of them. Okay, one of them is cilia. It's a hair-like structure. So if this is my cell, all right, you've got this kind of like wavy, like hair-like structures that come off. Okay, that's the first type is called microvilli. The second one we just talked about is ciliated. The third is called flagella. Okay, those are the modifications that we can see. All right, so real quick, let's run through. The non-ciliated means there's no cilia, there's no hair on it. All right, but it does have what's called the microvilli. Okay, and microvilli, if you're looking at it under a microscope, they look kind of fuzzy. So we refer to that as the brush border. Okay, in this type of epithelium, we actually see what we call a unicellular gland. All right, it's one single cell that has gland-like properties. It secretes stuff. It makes stuff. All right, this type of gland is called a goblet cell. So a goblet, like the glass here. Okay, so it's got this big bulbous part, and then, all right, part of it gets really small and skinny. Okay, like that. Well, these goblet cells make a glycoprotein. What a glycoprotein, I know we didn't get to it today in lecture, but a glycoprotein is a protein with a carbohydrate group attached to it, okay? And this glycoprotein, all right, is called mucin. So it makes all this mucin, and then when it's time, it'll secrete it out of the gland, all right? And when that mucin mixes with water, it turns into mucus. The mucus has several functions. One, it acts as a lubricant, so it reduces friction, all right, but also it helps to neutralize acid, stomach acid, for example, okay? It'll help to neutralize it. So we're going to see this type, all right, of epithelium in the digestive tract, pretty much from the stomach all the way down to the end of the digestive tract, to the anus. Okay, stomach to the anus. I'll let you finish copying that down. I'm going to end tonight because the other slide we'll get into a little bit more. Okay. Any questions, guys, girls, people, folks?